It worked the first time. That's why I didn't question it. I came home late. Nothing unusual. Same hallway. Same door. I took out my key, inserted it into the lock, turned it. It opened. Smooth. Exactly as it always had. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me, and didn't think about it again. The next day, everything was the same, until I tried to leave. I grabbed my keys, went to the door, inserted the key, and turned it. It worked, but not exactly the same. I stopped, because I felt it, the resistance. Slight. Almost nothing, but different. The turn wasn't smooth. It was tighter. I opened the door, stepped outside, then paused, looked at the lock. It looked normal. No scratches. No changes. I shrugged it off. Old locks do that. Sometimes they stick. That's normal. I left. Didn't think about it. Until later. That night I came back. Same door. Same key. I inserted it again, turned it, and this time it was different. Not just resistance. The angle. I had to turn it slightly further. Not much, but enough to notice. I stopped mid-turn. Then continued. The lock clicked. I opened the door. Stood there for a moment, then quietly said, "That wasn't the same." The hallway didn't respond. Of course. It was just a lock. I stepped inside, closed the door, and tried to ignore it. But something stayed. That small difference, that feeling, like it hadn't matched perfectly. The next morning I tested it, not because I needed to, because I wanted to be sure. I stood at the door. Took the key, inserted it slowly, turned it, and immediately I felt it. Different again. Not tighter, not looser. Just wrong. The motion didn't match what I expected. I stopped, turned it back, then tried again. Same result. It worked, but not the same way. I opened the door, then closed it again, locked it, unlocked it. Each time slightly different. Not enough to fail, but enough to feel off. I stepped back, stared at the door. Then said quietly, "It should be the same, because that's how locks work. Exact. Mechanical. Consistent. Not like this." I left again, but this time I couldn't ignore it. All day, I kept thinking about it. Not the door. The feeling, the mismatch, like something that should align. DIDN single quotes T. That evening, I came back again, slower this time, more aware. I stood in front of the door, looked at the lock. Then at the key. Everything looked normal. I inserted it. Carefully. Turned it. And this time I froze, because it wasn't just different. It was unfamiliar. The movement felt like something I hadn't done before. I completed the turn. The lock clicked, but the sound was slightly off. Quieter. Delayed. I stepped inside, closed the door. And immediately tried again. Lock. Unlock. Lock. Unlock. Each time a different feeling, a different motion, a different response, but always it worked. I stepped back, looked at my hand. Then at the key. Then at the door, and quietly said, "It fits," then paused. But not the same way. The room remained silent, but something had changed. Not in the lock. In my understanding of it. Because now I knew something clearly. This wasn't wear. This wasn't damage. This wasn't random. The key still worked. Every time. But never the same way twice. I stood there. Hand still on the key. And for the first time, I felt it. Not confusion. Not fear. Just awareness that something simple was no longer consistent. And that meant something else was changing. Not the lock, not the key, but the way they matched. I slowly pulled the key out, looked at it. Then back at the lock, and said quietly, "Which one is correct?" No answer, but the question stayed. Because now there wasn't just one way to open the door. There were many, and none of them felt exactly right. I didn't leave right away the next morning. Not this time. Stayed at the door. Looking at it. The lock. The key in my hand. Trying to remember how it used to feel. Exact. Smooth. Predictable. One motion. Always the same. I lifted the key. Inserted it slowly. Turned it. And immediately, I knew. Different again. Not tighter. Not looser. Just NICLIGNED. Like the motion didn't belong to the lock, but still it worked. The click came. The door unlocked. I stopped mid-turn. Then slowly turned it back. Lock. Then again. Unlock. Each time. A new variation. A new angle. A new resistance. I stepped back. Because now I understood something. It wasn't random. It was changing. Every time I left the apartment, closed the door behind me. And as I walked away, I realized something else. I couldn't remember which version was correct. Not clearly. Not even approximately. I stopped in the hallway, turned back, looked at the door, and quietly said, "How was it before?" No answer. Just the door. Unchanged. I went through the day, but the thought stayed. Not strong, but constant. Like something unfinished. That evening, I came back. Slower than usual. More careful. I stood in front of the door. Didn't touch it yet. Just looked. Then I noticed something. The keyhole. It looked the same. But something about it felt slightly different. I leaned closer. Tried to focus. But the moment I did, it felt normal again. I stepped back. Exhaled. Then tried something else. I took the key, but didn't insert it immediately. Just held it near the lock. And for a moment, I had a strange thought. What if it doesn't expect this one? I paused. Then slowly inserted it. Turned it. And it worked. But again, not the same. Never the same. I stepped inside. Closed the door. And this time, I didn't stop. I tested it again. Lock. Unlock. Lock. Unlock. Faster. Now. Watching. And then something changed. On one of the turns, the key hesitated. Not resistance. Pause. A brief moment where it didn't respond. I froze. Then slowly continued. Click. It opened. I pulled the key out, looked at it. Then back at the lock, and quietly said, "You're adjusting." The room stayed silent. But now, that felt true. Not broken. Not random. Adaptive. I stood there. Thinking. Then did something different. I closed my eyes, inserted the key, turned it without looking, without expecting, just movement. And this time, it felt smoother. Not perfect, but closer. I opened my eyes. Tried again. Same approach. Less thinking, less comparing, and again closer. I exhaled slowly, because now I understood something new. The more I tried to match it, the less it aligned. The more I expected, the more it changed. I stepped back, then said quietly, "It doesn't want to be remembered." The words felt strange, but correct. I stood there for a moment. Then slowly, I noticed something else. The key in my hand felt slightly different. Not visibly. Just in weight. In balance. I turned it over, looked carefully. It looked the same, but I wasn't sure anymore. I walked to the table, placed it down, stepped back, then returned, picked it up again, and for a second, it didn't feel familiar. I stared at it. Then said quietly, "Which one is this?" No answer. But now the question had changed. It wasn't just about the lock anymore. Or the key. It was about which version I was holding. And whether any of them had ever truly matched. I looked at the door again, then back at the key. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was using the same one. I didn't trust it anymore. Not the lock, not the key, not even the motion. I stood in front of the door, holding the key. And for a moment, I didn't move, because now I wasn't sure what would happen. Not if it would fail, but how it would work. That was the difference. I stepped closer, looked at the lock, then at the key. Everything looked the same, but that didn't mean anything anymore. I inserted it slowly, carefully, and before I turned it, I stopped because something felt wrong. Not resistance, not misalignment, something else. I pulled the key out, looked at it, then back at the lock, and for a moment, I had a strange thought. This isn't the same lock. I frowned, looked closer. Same shape, same scratches, everything identical. And yet it didn't feel like the same one. I stepped back, then forward again, trying to reset the feeling, but it didn't change. I inserted the key again, turned it, this time. It felt completely new, not just different. Unfamiliar, like I had never used this lock before. The turn was longer, smoother, almost effortless, click, the door unlocked. I stood there, hand still on the key, and quietly said, "That's not right," because that didn't match anything, not the old feeling, not the recent ones, something else. I opened the door, stepped inside, closed it behind me, then immediately tried again. Lock, unlock, lock, unlock, and each time a different motion, a different length, a different response. Some turned shorter, some longer, some smooth, some uneven. But all of them worked. I stepped back, breathing slower now, because this wasn't just variation anymore, it was multiplicity, like there wasn't one lock. There were many, all in the same place. I walked to the table, picked up the key again, looked at it carefully, and then I noticed something, the edges. They didn't feel consistent, not visibly, but when I touched them, they felt slightly different. I ran my finger along the metal, and for a brief moment it felt like a different shape. Then normal again. I froze, then said quietly, "There isn't just one." The room stayed silent, but the idea stayed. I returned to the door, stood in front of it, then did something different. I held the key near the lock, but didn't insert it. Just hovered, and waited. After a few seconds, I felt it. Not physically, a shift. Like something was aligning, or choosing. I slowly inserted the key, turned it, and this time it felt consistent. Not perfect, but stable. I stopped mid-turn. Then completed it. Click. I stepped back. Tried again. Same feeling. I nodded slowly. So that was it. Not random. Not infinite. Selective. The lock wasn't changing randomly. It was matching something. I looked at my hand. At the way I held the key. At the way I moved. Then said quietly, "It's choosing the version." The words felt strange, but correct. I stood there, thinking, then tested something. I changed how I held the key. Slightly, different angle, different grip. Inserted it again, turned it, and immediately different. Not aligned anymore. I exhaled slowly. So that confirmed it. It wasn't just the lock or the key. It was the interaction. The moment. The position. I stepped back, looked at the door. Then at the key, and quietly said, "There are many ways this works." Then paused. But not all of them belong here. The silence didn't respond, but something about the space felt slightly unstable now, like it was aware of the difference. I walked away from the door. Just a few steps, then stopped, because suddenly I wasn't sure of something simple. Had I locked it? Or unlocked it? I turned around, looked at the handle. It looked the same. I stepped closer, touched it. It didn't move. Locked. I nodded. Then froze, because I didn't remember locking it. Not clearly. Not at all. I looked at the key in my hand, then back at the door, and quietly said, "Which one did that?" No answer, but the question felt important, because now it wasn't just about how the lock worked. It was about which version of me was using it. I didn't touch the door for a while. Not after that, because now it wasn't just uncertain, it was unstable. I stood in the middle of the room, looking at the door, the lock, the key in my hand. And for the first time, I didn't trust any of it, not the object, not the action, not even the result. I walked slowly back to the door, stopped just in front of it, but didn't reach out, because now I understood something else. It wasn't about opening or closing anymore. It was about which version of the action would happen. I took a slow breath, then raised the key, held it near the lock, and waited, not moving, not deciding, just present. And after a few seconds, I felt it again. That shift, subtle, like something had settled. I inserted the key, turned it, and this time, everything aligned, perfectly, no resistance, no variation, exactly as it used to be. I froze, because that hadn't happened in a long time. I turned it back, tried again, same result, smooth, exact, consistent. I stepped back, slowly, then said quietly, "This is the original." The words felt strange, but correct. I looked at the door, at the lock. Everything felt stable, fixed, for the first time. It felt like there was only one version again. I reached for the handle, paused, then slowly turned it, the door opened, without hesitation, without delay. I looked inside. The hallway, everything normal, unchanged. I stepped out, closed the door behind me, then immediately tested it, inserted the key, turned it. Still perfect. Still aligned, I exhaled, because now it seemed like it was over, like whatever had been happening had resolved. I stepped back, looked at the door one last time, then turned away, walked down the hallway. Everything felt normal again, stable, consistent. But after a few steps, I stopped, because something felt off, very slight, almost nothing. I turned back, looked at the door, it looked the same, exactly the same, and yet I wasn't sure, not about the door, about what had just happened. I walked back slowly, stopped in front of it again, and without thinking, I reached for the key, inserted it, turned it, and immediately it changed, not completely, but enough, the smoothness was gone, the alignment slightly off. I froze, then slowly turned it back, tried again. Different again, not the same as before. I stepped back, because now it was clear. There wasn't a correct version, There was just a moment where everything aligned, and then it passed. I looked at the key in my hand, then at the lock, and quietly said, "It's not fixed." The silence remained, but the meaning stayed. I stood there for a long time, not trying to fix it, not trying to understand it completely, just observing. And slowly I realized something else, It wasn't the lock that changed. It wasn't the key, It wasn't even the motion, It was the moment. Each time a different alignment, a different version, and none of them lasted. I lowered my hand, stepped away from the door, and quietly said, "You can't repeat it." Because now I knew, no matter how many times I tried, there was no way to get the exact same turn twice. And that meant something simple was no longer repeatable. I looked at the door one last time, then turned away. Because now I understood, it wasn't about opening the door. It was about realizing that nothing matched the same way twice. And once you saw that, you couldn't go back, I stopped trying. Not because I gave up, because I understood, there was nothing to fix. Nothing to return to, no correct version. I stood in front of the door, one last time, the key in my hand, the lock in front of me, both unchanged. And yet, completely different. I didn't insert the key. Not immediately. Just stood there, looking, because now I could see it. Not physically, but clearly. Every time I used the lock, it wasn't the same. Action even if it looked the same, even if it felt similar. It wasn't repeatable. Not exactly. I took a slow breath, then raised the key, inserted it, turned it, and let whatever happened happen. No expectations. No memory. No comparison. Just movement. The lock turned. It clicked. The door unlocked. I didn't analyze it, didn't question it. Just opened the door, stepped through, closed it behind me. And for the first time, I didn't check it again. I didn't need to, because now I understood something simple. The lock had never failed. The key had never been wrong. It was the idea that it should always match the same way that didn't hold. I walked into the room. Everything looked the same. The table. The chair. The space. Nothing had changed, and yet everything felt different. Not unstable, not wrong, just not fixed. I sat down, looked at my hands, then at the key, resting quietly. As if nothing had ever happened. I picked it up. Turned it in my fingers, and for a moment it felt completely unfamiliar, then normal again. I nodded slightly, because now that made sense. Nothing stayed the same. Not even simple things. Not even small movements. Not even something as exact as a lock. I stood up, walked back to the door. Not to test it. Just to stand there. I placed my hand on the handle. Paused. Then stepped back, because I didn't need to open it again. Not right now. Not to prove anything. I turned away, walked across the room. Each step slightly different. Each movement not quite the same as before. And for the first time, that didn't feel wrong. It felt real. I stopped, looked around. The room remained still. Quiet. Complete. Not repeating. Just existing. I took a breath, then said quietly, "It never needed to match." The silence didn't respond, but it didn't need to. Because now I wasn't looking for consistency. I wasn't trying to repeat anything. I wasn't comparing one moment to another. I was just in a. And that was enough. I walked to the window, looked outside. People moving. Doors opening. Closing. Countless. Small actions, all slightly different. All unnoticed. All unrepeatable. I stepped back, turned away, and set the key down. Not carefully. Not deliberately. Just naturally, because it didn't matter how. It would never be exactly the same again anyway. I sat down. Rested. And let everything be as it was. Not fixed. Not repeated. Just happening. And for the first time, that felt complete.